Denis Villeneuve, we've said it many times on this show, only hits home runs. But I have to say, like, this is probably his worst movie.
Oh, okay.
Drive-by movies you're watching.
Fresh releases.
My name's Blaise.
My name is James.
And this week we're talking about Denis Villeneuve's brand new film, Dune Part 2.
May thy knife chip and shatter.
It's been almost 3 years since we got Dune Part 1. Finally, Dune Part 2 is out. It's about Paul Atreides, who unites with Shani and the Freeman while seeking revenge against the conspirators who destroyed his family. So, Denis Villeneuve is back. We know that this has been a passion project of his since the 80s, and we all know that we've gotten multiple versions of Dune. We've got David Lynch's version. We've had a documentary about a version of Dune that was supposed to come out back in the 70s from a director who hadn't even read the books. And then there's also TV miniseries. And is this finally the movie to set the tone for sci-fi movies of the future? And is it up there with Star Wars? Let's hear our thoughts. Blaise, what did you think of Dune Part 2?
So yeah, Dune has been a phenomenon. Is this the definitive version of Dune? Yeah, probably. I mean, the bar is set very, very low. Is this maybe the best version of Dune we'll even see in our lifetime? Who knows? I'd guess probably not. I would just want to preface going into this, like, I did rewatch the first film right before seeing this. I think a lot of people did because it had been not as fresh in our mind going into part 2. You know, you just want to get a little refresher right before watching the second one. And I absolutely loved it. You know, I really enjoyed the first film before when I first watched it. And then even watching it again, I loved it even more. The mythology, you know, everything was really there, and was just it's a really good movie. Then Dune Part 2, you know, obviously watched it, and I just didn't really connect with this one at all. It just didn't work for me. I feel like there's aspects that I enjoyed of it. Obviously, you know, the cinematography is lush and beautiful. Story-wise, I think it works, so, you know, at times, but then there are some elements that just definitely didn't work for me. Felt very contradictory and flat. Anyways, James, what do you think of this film?
Yeah, it's disappointing to hear, but overall I can see what you're saying, because I really enjoyed this movie. I had a great time and do want to see it again. But I do prefer the first one by a large margin still, though. This one I'd say is a little bit more digestible for those who found the first one boring, which is a lot of people, I think, that are out there. I still see it constantly on, like, Facebook group message boards, you know, people on Twitter. Not so much my letterbox. I like all the people on my letterbox. I hate all the people I follow on social media. But what's it called? I don't know how people didn't like the first one, but I get it, though. It's not everyone's cup of tea. This one I can see being a lot more digestible, but maybe if you're still not a fan of the first Dune, maybe you won't like this one. But at least this one kind of sets the pace, kind of going forward as an action movie right from the get-go, versus the first one not really being so much an action movie and more of like just a world building sci-fi, like opera almost. But yeah, I absolutely preferred the first one, but this one was still such a fun watch. Both movies I've seen at the Universal IMAX theaters. If you have that option, highly recommend it. Just hearing the vibration of the speakers is insane. It's like you're getting that 4DX experience, but just in a normal 2D theater.
Yeah, and I think that your experience watching it, you know, at Universal City Walk, of course, like, you got the definitive version. Was it IMAX 70 millimeter?
IMAX 70 millimeter. So yeah, not a lot of people get to see. They saw Dune Part 2 and Oppenheimer in 70 millimeter IMAX, but I'm happy to say I have. Yeah, I'm rubbing it in, obviously.
So you got the definitive version. So I mean, if anyone is going to enjoy the film, I mean, a lot of people did, but I mean, like, I feel like that's the way to see it. You know, I obviously didn't see it that way. I don't know if that would have impacted my experience with the film, because of a lot of the issues that I have with it is pacing and story issues. But yeah, it just felt like there's a lot of moments where the rules of engagement just feel very like convenient at times, and maybe that's just throughout the Dune universe. There's so much world building in this movie that like the first 90 minutes, maybe even more, is like more world building that we didn't get from the first film. The first film does a very good job of world building throughout, like I would say, the entire runtime of the movie. This film, you get that whole other world building element that the Fremens, where we got, you know, bits and pieces of that Fremen world building in the first film, but you really get it from, you know, the POV of the Fremens and Timothée Chalamet's character Paul Atreides really, you know, immersing himself in the culture. But yeah, I just feel like those elements, like the foot's not on the gas for the first 2 acts of the movie, and then when you get to the moments where you're kind of expecting a little bit more, there's just not as much attention given to those moments, so they almost seem like they fall into parody a little bit. I know that Star Wars, I mean, we mentioned that in the intro of this video, but also other science fiction works have stolen, whether it's literary or film or even television, have stolen, you know, and lifted heavily from Frank Herbert's work. But I don't necessarily feel like that makes it, when this finally hits the screen, you know, Denis' vision of this film finally hits the screen, like that almost gives it like this weight just because it's the original. I do feel like it detracts that so many people have stolen from it, and now I see it and I don't feel like it's that original vision that I feel like everyone is really you know, praising. I do think that sucks. Like, I'm sorry, that does seem unfair almost in a way. But so some of the issues that I really had was like Paul's turn to, you know, when he finally drinks this, you know, just gonna get into spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, obviously go check it out, or if you just don't care, like, you can keep watching the video, of course. But yeah, like, I feel like Paul's turn happens so fast that there's really just no emotional gravity to that moment. It's just like, I'm like, okay, is it just a parody? I think like we can easily look back at the Star Wars prequels to being like, this is how you know, turn a character that seems like they're the hero throughout, you know, a trilogy, and then they kind of turn evil. Like, at times that's even laughable and feels like parody, but this was like the flip happens in one scene and it's just like, okay, like, all right, you know. But a lot of that didn't work for me. I don't know how you feel about that.
I mean, it didn't necessarily bother me. It did feel a little quick, like the resolutions within this movie, because there's a lot of setup on where it's supposed to go, and, you know, there's a lot of buildup. One of my complaints within the movie, because I do have quite a few actually as well, just like I said, I really enjoyed this movie, but I just preferred the first one. But I didn't sense any chemistry at all between Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya. Like, you know, they're breathtaking, great looking couple. You know, they have that, like, you know, old school Hollywood couple look to them. And I think I liked both of them within the movie too. I'll admit it, I do not like Timothée Chalamet. I haven't really liked him in anything I've seen. And I thought he was very miscast in the first one, but I did actually enjoy him better within this one, just because, you know, the first 45 minutes of the movie is building him up as, like, you know, this leader, and like, oh, he's the chosen one that we've been seeing in this prophecy and stuff. So they, like, I saw him a little bit better within this movie. It's like, okay, now I'm seeing him as a leader much better, but I just didn't sense that chemistry or that sense of love, like, enough to where it's supposed to go in one direction. But, you know, of course, when we get to what you're talking about, when he realizes what he has to do and what he's supposed to do, it didn't necessarily bother me. It did feel rushed, I thought, but I'd say overall what felt most rushed was just the final battle scene, because I was expecting Helm's Deep, and Denis Villeneuve is, I'd say, the best director working today. He hasn't made a bad movie, in my opinion. But just, I don't think he's the best director at shooting action sequences. I did like the knife fight scene between Austin Butler and Timothée Chalamet, just with the silence and no music. It did bring an intensity to it. And I liked, you know, the silhouette shots of them with the sunset behind them and they're covered in shadow. But, you know, that whole battle sequence, like, there was so much planning going into it. I thought it was going to end with, like, you know, like a resolution was going to be solved in a third movie or something. But, you know, I don't know anything about the books. I don't know how they end. But, you know, when it ended, I was just like, oh, this is just the end of book one now. So now we have Messiah, which is the second book, but apparently that does a time jump, so I'm not expecting that one anytime soon. I'm sure Warner Brothers is going to want Denis Villeneuve to do it, and I know he says he wants to do it, but Not sure how that's going to go about it, but that's nothing to worry about right now. I was just surprised how quickly the movie kind of ended, because it didn't feel like a resolution. I'm not sure if the book ends 100% exactly the same, but I could see what you mean by it feeling rushed, but not necessarily that part bothered me. It's just, I was like, oh, okay. This is the fall of the emperor. He is going to take a new bride and they're going to be the leaders now. And just like, I was like, okay, this is a lot solved. And he has a cousin and he just killed his own cousin. And his sister is about to come. And like, I was like, okay, this is a lot of stuff I'm looking forward to. But it's just like, for Denis Villeneuve being a director who focuses more on visual instead of dialogue, he likes to convey stuff through visuals and not have things explained to you. It just felt like a lot of stuff was just like, this is what's going to happen, this happens, and here's a resolution. And that was a small bummer for me.
And I think a lot of that goes back to my issues with the pacing. It feels like the moments that should have a lot of gravity to them, especially that final scene, are just rushed into, and it just feels like, I'm not complaining about like, oh, there was a lack of action, I cared about that. No, I love the first movie, which literally has like barely any action. So this film that, definitely does have more action, it felt like the moments that needed more attention to them, needed more of the runtime, definitely lost out to that, because a lot of that runtime was just given to 90 plus minutes of Fremen world building around the world of Arrakis, which is cool, but the moments that should have a lot of gravity towards them, we're just lacking in that moment. Especially a lot of the stuff I liked and getting into the final scene was just like kiss the ring. I love all of those moments of that stuff had the emotion for me, and the gravity, when Austin Butler's calling Chani a pet, like, just, you're like, oh, what's going on here? But then when you get to like the duel, like, even in the first film, honestly, a lot of that stuff didn't work for me. I think it's just visually uninteresting. The choreography, they're doing the best job that they can about two guys dueling like an old school, like almost they would duel from like the 1700s or something, but it's just like very visually uninteresting when there are these elements of people using using guns in the final battle, and then they're like, oh, let's just fight this out like honorably with knives, when we're convinced that Austin Butler's character is a psychopath. So, and throughout the movie, we're convinced that he's like this crazy psychopath who wants an unfair fight to be in his favor, but then Léa Seydoux's character tells us that all he cares about is honor. We're never led to believe that he's honorable beyond that final scene in the movie where he actually is willing to engage in a fair knife fight against an Atreides. I just felt like his character didn't work at all, and especially if we're gonna put so many prosthetics on Elvis, like, just cast the Baron Harkonnen's son, Bill Skarsgård, to be like, you just made him look the same. Like, just cast Bill Skarsgård. I don't know how busy his schedule is amongst filming The Crow, but yeah, that was just kind of bizarre for me. But yeah, I think honestly, going into this movie, like, we know it's going to be good. Like you said, Denis Villeneuve we've said it many times on this show, only hits home runs. But I have to say, like, for this film, this is probably his worst movie. And I mean, take with that what you will. I'm not saying that this is a bad movie. It's just his worst movie.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of people now that this movie's out, like, coming out with lists on what their ideas, like, Denis Villeneuve's worst movie. And it's really hard placing them and stuff. And, my favorites list, I'm sure, is going to be very different amongst everyone. But that's the whole fun of film, though, too. Question stuff, make people really think about it. Is this everyone's first Lord of the Rings experience and stuff? Comparing it to that, actually, one of my other problems within the movie was kind of the editing pace, because my favorite moment is actually the 30 minutes we get with Austin Butler and the Baron as well, just because it's a huge tonal shift within the movie. We have this 45 minutes to an hour of Paul, learning all this training and everything. Then out of nowhere, we just get all these like black and white sequences, and it's just like grim, evil, and dark. But that easily could have been sprinkled throughout the movie to make Austin Butler a lot more menacing. Like, good example, Heath Ledger's Joker. A lot of people were saying, I think even Denis Villeneuve said that this is the best villain since Heath Ledger's Joker. And I think what worked for that movie in The Dark Knight was just Heath Ledger's sequences are all only a couple minutes long throughout the movie, but they're so memorable because it happens like, 20 minutes of this, then a Joker scene, and then like that sticks with you because it's horrific. These sequences could have been horrific, like that opening sequence where he slashes the throat and everyone's freaked out. Like, have that be his introduction, then pause, then show him back in the ring and stuff, then pause, then show that weird awkward scene with the Baron. But because it's all placed in one 30-minute blob, it's my favorite sequence of the movie. It just, like, they probably could have built his character a little bit better, and I feel like you probably would have enjoyed him better if they sprinkled it a little bit better.
Yeah, I think he is kind of in the background for the film. I think they focus way too hard on certain elements, and that's where a lot of the issues I have with the pacing of the film come in. I agree with you. I think if they sprinkled him throughout the film, he would have felt like a more important character than he was. I mean, he's an important character in the books, obviously enough to make it into the movie. But
Sting played him, so yeah.
Yeah, but it does feel like he's really only in 3 scenes. So they like, some of the scenes are longer, but it just feels like, okay, we just get to him like already dying at the end of the film like pretty quickly when they almost just introduced him 30 minutes ago, but then he went MIA for a whole 45 minutes. So it does feel like just weird. One of the big issues I have with Denis Villeneuve's Dune universe, though, and this even goes back to the first film, or it wasn't an issue with me for the first film, is just what are the rules about shields here? And this is like, I know it might be getting a little too into the weeds, but it feels like there's one throwaway line in the beginning of the film where like the Harkonnens mention like, don't use shields like when they're fighting the Fremen, and I would assume that that's probably because they don't see the Fremen as worthy adversaries. But then throughout the movie, they're just like, okay, we're gonna use shields here, we're not gonna use shields here. It just feels like it never decides like whether shields are viable or whether they're always on, or I don't know. It's the shields feel like a really convenient plot device when they need to be, and then when they don't, they just kind of get rid of it just to get to the point. But yeah, that was just an issue with I felt like the world of Arrakis for me. I don't know how it is in the books, but I don't feel like I don't need it just straight up explained. Like, I'm not saying that. I just feel like it was always conveniently inconvenient or convenient,
I see. Yeah, I mean, I didn't notice it as much in this movie. I just know in the first one they explain like, the best way to penetrate through the shield is when it's slowly moved. I remember it was like a throwaway line in the first one. I only know just because I rewatched the first one, of course, in preparation for this one. But that's when it also just sat with me, just like, damn, this first one is so amazing. I remember leaving the theater and I couldn't wait to see it again. And then I watched it on HBO Max, I think the next day, and watched it a couple times. And I bought the 4K right away, even though I never ended up watching the 4K till this last week. But yeah, this one, granted, I enjoyed it. I still do want to see it a second time. But I still preferred the first one. But, I hear your thoughts and I see it. I still gave it a great review. But here's the thing, though. If you go to my Letterboxd, I gave it 3.5 stars. I remember the same thing happened with Godzilla -1. A lot of people, anyone who gave that movie 3.5 stars, they'd be like, what did you not like about it? And it's like, that doesn't mean I disliked it. That's a hugely high review. That's a great review for me getting 3.5 stars. But like, just because I didn't give it 5 stars, like, you kidding me? Like, this isn't a 5-star movie. I don't think there is such thing as a 5-star movie. I just preferred the first one. That's a 4-star movie, which is like the highest praise for me. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of lie on the same side of the coin when it comes to reviews. Like, we've always felt like 4 stars is like an excellent movie, but I think a lot of people just see 4 stars as a good movie. So our scale, it kind of sucks on Letterboxd because our scale is definitely like, sometimes it feels like we might be more harsh on a film than we actually are, or we're not as generous to a film that we actually really enjoy. So we need to start grading films on a curve, because I've kind of started doing it. At least, like, if I like generally enjoy a film, like there's a lot of 2.5 star movies that I love, but just I don't see them as being great movies. So it's and then there's even like bad movies that I like that are 1 star, like. So, right. Or that I love. So that's usually where I like to throw in the heart, like those are the things I like. I'd rewatch again, obviously. But yeah, when it comes to rating movies, it seems like we have to start grading on the same curve that Letterboxd is to at least be as impactful as everyone else is.
Absolutely, yeah. So everyone, I mean, even though it's not the biggest box office movie, I mean, like, I like to think that we generate a lot of people who enjoy cinema and stuff. I assume if you're watching this, you don't watch our videos to watch Marvel reviews, because there isn't any on our channel. So, Dune is, might not seem up our alley, but it is up our alley. And, what did you think about it? Did you agree with us? Let us know in the comments down below. That's a great way to help support the show.
If you guys haven't already, go ahead and smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, and click that notification bell to get all of our latest updates.
And speaking of updates, be sure to catch all our social media links down below. We got Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and also, you heard it earlier, we have our own Letterboxd account, so check us out there. That'll conclude this week's episode. Tune in next week for a brand new video.